Hey, what's up, everybody? This is DJ Martin, church pastor at Parker Ford Church. Welcome to our ongoing midweek teaching series called Reflections on Spiritual Formation. All year on Wednesdays, we've been taking about 10 to 15 minutes to talk about spiritual formation, different concepts regarding what it means to be formed deeper into the image of God. And we're continuing that series today with a conversation titled Lifelong Learners Who Read Broadly. Often what I'll do in these 10 to 15-minute teachings is I'll kind of have a concept and a scripture, maybe a story of Jesus or a couple verses, and we'll go after that. I think the scriptures have lots to speak to us about being lifelong learners. There's many verses in Proverbs that would talk about things like that. Certainly the prophetic scriptures in the New Testament. We're told to love the Lord our God with all our minds, which has been a really important verse for me. There's others, but instead of focusing on a particular scripture today, I want to focus on just a couple of conversational concepts that I think do speak to our formation as people, and our formation as image bearers, and our formation in the image of Christ. So again, today's conversation is titled "Lifelong Learners Who Read Broadly." What I want to encourage you today in your own spiritual journey, in your walk with the Lord, in your pilgrimage towards being more deeply conformed into Jesus's image, I want to encourage you and challenge you to think about what it is that you are consuming from a media standpoint, from a social media standpoint, from a television movie standpoint, and maybe most importantly, from a reading standpoint, and how that is shaping to you. My wife and I have been watching this series from the History Channel lately called Alone, and I think they're on season 8 this year. We're kind of late to the game, so we've only watched most of the first season at this point. But I gotta tell you, I'm kind of obsessed with it. So the concept of Alone is they take 10 different people and they take them to some remote place. I think it's usually in like northern Canada, where it's just so remote and it's so cold. They drop them off in like September, and then it's just whoever can last the longest gets $500,000. And so they don't know how many contestants are left. They don't know, like, each person is just totally isolated. They don't know, they don't have books or phones or anything with them. They have a camera, they film themselves, and then they get 10 tools. And it's amazing to watch these people, how creative they are, how difficult it is to be isolated and alone, but then what the human mind and spirit can do. And these are just people, they're quote unquote survival experts, but these are people taken from, family lives and from jobs, and all of a sudden they're dropped in the wilderness. And it's just amazing to see what human creativity, the structures that they build for themselves to live in, the ways of nourishing their body that they come up with. Some of them build handmade instruments and play music, and it's just amazing. In this age, it's terrifying to think how stunted our intellectual capacities have been. And not just intellectual capacities, our relational capacities, how stunted our growth as holistic persons is, by the ease and the comfort, the noise and the busyness of our lives. How easy is it at the end of the day to just turn on the TV and veg out for 2 to 3 hours or maybe more? How easy is it when you're just sitting there to pull out your phone and open up Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or, whatever? How easy is it just to kind of coast through life without being intentional, without seeking to face challenging situations, without seeking to grow? I mean, the modern world just numbs us. It numbs our souls. It numbs our minds. I mean, it is life sucking and life numbing to live in this modern culture unless we are super intentional about the way that we engage growing and learning. And so we need to be lifelong learners. And maybe the primary way that this is possible in our culture, where literacy rates are, really, really high compared to world history, is that we can read really broadly. I mean, if you have a Kindle uh, or on your phone, you can read books from around the world or listen to books on Audible. Read broadly. I've found that many evangelical Christians read pretty narrowly. And this could be for any number of reasons. It could be that you've been taught to be scared of reading books written by people from different perspectives, who, aren't uh, explicitly writing about Jesus or that kind of thing. And that's a tragedy because there are so many wonderful things to learn and so many books to read from all over the place. And so that's the main point I want to talk about today is be a person who reads broadly. If you read a lot of Christian literature, maybe it's sort of the popular level self-help devotional kind of reading. Um, Generally, what happens is that we end up reading uh, books written by people who look a lot like us. Maybe they're from our same culture, same socioeconomic background, same political leanings, same theological leanings. And we just, by doing it's not bad to read books by people who are like us, but what it does over the course of a long period of time is when we just read from the same perspective over and over and over again, we just get narrower and narrower and narrower in our ability to see any given issue. And we believe like this is the only way to see this thing. This is the only way, to handle the scriptures or to approach this difficult political situation or whatever. When we just listen to one side, the one of the common phrases that's used, and it's an important one to wrestle with, is the idea of an echo chamber. And that's used from a political standpoint. Are you in an echo chamber? Do you just listen to people who say the things that you already agree with? That's a problem. And in the same way, do you only read from people that you already agree with? Then why are you reading, like, at that point? And again, I'm not saying don't read uh, people who look like you or believe the same things. I'm just inviting you, challenging you to read more broadly, to be a little bit more courageous and brave. It's okay to read things that you disagree with. Not only is it okay, it's really healthy. And so I have a practice. I don't follow it religiously or anything like that. But in my own reading, I love reading. I've been a lifelong reader since I was a little kid, and just a couple of things. I rotate the types of things I'm reading. So I'm in a heavy season right now of reading stuff on the background of the book of Luke, because we're going into that as a church. We're going to be walking through the book of Luke. I'm going to be teaching through Luke. So I've been reading commentaries and listening to teachings on Luke and doing more like theological biblical studies reading on that topic. But uh, I also am always trying to read biographies. I have a whole list of biographies that I'm trying to work through over time. And so I'll read some stuff that's like more theologically oriented, and then I'll read biographies, and not sometimes a biography on a Christian, sometimes a biography on just someone I find to be really interesting, whether a musician or a politician or a historical figure, something something interesting where you can just hear a story and hear what the world looked like through that person's eyes. Then I try to read fiction. I'll sprinkle in classics, and I love the Russian classics. That's been one of my favorite kind of genres over the years. So I'll sprinkle in classics. So I'm trying to read theologically. I'm trying to read biographies. I'm trying to read fiction. And then I also try to read fantasy and sci-fi just to spark my imagination. I mean, how many of us have had the experience of reading the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, or the Wingfeather Saga, or whatever, and our minds just growing in our ability to see the world and our imaginations expanding. And so read broadly. Don't just read the same stuff. Read broadly and read from people that have a different point of view. It's that's super important. You can't understand the argument from a different side until you try to really understand it. If you approach every, this is obvious in like political situations. If you're just reading people that agree with you, it's going to be really hard for you to empathize, or to even fully understand the other side of the story, or another angle at the issue. So read if you're conservative, read progressive material. It's good to be challenged and stretched. I've been reading recently. I've read Tim Keller's The Reason for God, which I'd never read before. And he has this great section at the beginning where he's like, in the conservative church, we so often have this mindset that when we have doubts or struggles, we need to be afraid of that. We need to have all the answers. But he says, and I really appreciate this about Keller, he says, no, if you have doubts, you need to examine them. You need to listen to them. You need to explore them. You need to wrestle with them. You need to read broadly around the things that you're wrestling with and having doubt around. So, that's coming from, a very respected voice in the conservative church, Tim Keller, where he's just giving an invitation to you and I, to think broadly, think broadly. Jesus can handle it. If Jesus is who we believe he is, if he really is the King of Kings, if he really is the Lord, then he can handle our questions, and he's bigger than the boxes that we've built for him. So read broadly. And then the last point I want to touch on, I could be on my soapbox, my proverbial soapbox, a lot about this subject. But the last thing I want to talk about here is, we're formed by what we give our attention to. And there might not be a more toxic thing forming people's minds culturally right now than cable news. And I mean that from both spectrums, from more conservative and from more progressive liberal. It's awful. And so I just want to challenge you, if that's a habit of yours, to regularly be formed by cable news. Just understand that there is an agenda there to form your mind, to lead you down a path of formation, that is often probably antithetical to being formed into the image of Jesus Christ as the one true King, the one true leader that we follow. And so I would just challenge you, if that's a regular practice of yours, to listen to sort of the talking, screaming heads, partisan, often biased voices, that it's usually better to read your news than it is to watch people talk about news, because that's opinion based. It's not going to be vetted and fact checked and all of those things. So I've found that I get a better understanding of topics and issues if I'm reading than if I'm watching. And I think that's probably the case for many subjects, not just how we engage news. So, one of the really difficult things about being a shepherd, teacher, pastor in the current climate is that, people might spend an average of 4 hours a day on their phone, an hour to 2 hours a day watching news, and then, several hours a day on screens at work through their computer. You add that all together, and that means people are being formed by constant information. We're being formed by constant information through TV, through social media, through our phones, through our computers, 6 to 8 hours conservatively, 6 to 8 hours a day. You come to church and you listen to a 30-minute sermon once a week. There's no competing with that. A 30-minute sermon cannot form people. So what I want to challenge you is what you're consuming, what you're choosing to read, what you're choosing to watch. It is forming you much more deeply than a 30-minute sermon does. And that's not because I don't believe in good preaching or teaching. It's because the math just doesn't add up. If you're being formed by these things over and over again every single day, it's going to shape your heart much more than an hour-long service on a Sunday morning. So be a lifelong learner. Read broadly, Read the scriptures, read about the scriptures, read biographies, read fiction, read fantasy, read science fiction, read broadly, and let your mind be formed as you seek to be formed in the image of Christ. So just a couple of questions. What's shaping you? What voices have the most authority in your life? Is it a political figure? Is it a cable news network? A person or station? So what voices have the most authority in your life? Whose opinion do you most trust? Spiritually, economically, socially, politically. Do an inventory, do an internal inventory of the voices you trust, and just kind of weigh that. Are things in order in your life? And how might Jesus be inviting you to broaden, deepen, or widen the voices you consistently listen to? If you want book recommendations, reach out to me, or let's have a conversation. Let's continue the conversation about what it means to be a deeper people who are growing, lifelong learners in the image of Jesus. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you have a great day. I hope this was both challenging and encouraging to you as you seek to walk the way of Jesus. Have a great day. Go with God. Be blessed.